All right. So, as you know, Erdheim-Chester is an orphan disease included in the spectrum of systemic non-Langerhans cells astrocytosis with frequent recurrent BRAF mutation. And we have recent data about ECD and skin manifestations. You know, as many molecular targeted therapies, I will name it MTT, are currently used for patients with BRAF mutation, one might expect MTT toxicities, including skin manifestation. So my talk will deal with two parts. One part with the ECD skin manifestation, and the other one will be ECD and MTT skin toxicities. So let's talk with the skin manifestation in ECD. These data are quite recent. They have been described for about 5 years. The prevalence of skin manifestation in ECD averaged 19 to 28% of ECD patients. And there is a large clinical spectrum for this manifestation. I had the privilege to see patients of Julien Roche and to bring all the data, and we released the largest series of patients with ECD that have been released in JAMA Dermatology, in a JAD publication in last March. And I will deal first with this series to details the skin manifestation we can observe in ECD patients. So this study was a retrospective study. It included 123 patients with ECD. The aim of the studies was to describe skin manifestation, to search for xanthelasma-like lesions that were considered as a specific lesion for ECD, to search for other lesions composed of histiocytous cells, and we wanted also to analyze the pathology of skin samples, and we profit of this opportunity to make a case control study for pathology, comparing xanthelasma-like lesion in ECD patient to xanthelasma classic in other patients without ECD. And of course, we search and we look for BRAF mutation on skin biopsy performed for all these patients. And what we saw on the 40 patients, on these 40 patients that were mostly male, 67%, mean age at 51 years, diagnostic delay around 3 years, and sometimes cutaneous manifestation was the first symptoms of the ECD disease. And what we saw also that most of the pathology diagnostic were not done by extracutaneous tissue, but skin was relatively high for pathology and diagnosis of ECD. And we performed also BRAF status mutation, and we found that it was positive for more than 76% of people. Here are the main and the most frequent lesions, skin lesions in patients with ECD. This is the xanthelasma-like lesions. It is an eruption of papular or nodular lesions with brown or yellow color that are mostly symmetric and bilateral and sometimes circumferential around the eyes. In some patients, you get some extra periocular lesions that are a little bit atypical in the spectrum of xanthelasma lesions that are very atypic in this patient. So, characteristic of this patient, it was about 31 patients, was the most interesting for us was that we were able, each time we perform a biopsy on these xanthelasma-like lesions, we were able to find the BRAF mutation on 10 patients biopsy for search for this mutation. And what we looked for the lipid profile, because most of the xanthelasma in general population is linked to a bad lipid profile, but in this case, most of patients didn't have any cholesterol very high or a triglyceride. The lipid profile was normal. That is very unusual in classical xanthelasma. So, apart from this periocular eruption, we have other skin lesions that we observe in this patient. As you can see, we got some nodular lesions, some papules and plaques on the face of this patient, like this, and some crusty and brown lesions on these legs. Also, we could find on it a BRAF mutation in 50% of these patients. And what we found also was that, we have a spectrum and an overlap, and sometimes people have two kinds of histiocytosis, one with Langerhans cell histiocytosis associated with ECD disease, that is called the mixed form of histiocytosis, and we found in 6 patients that we could have both lesions with some lesion like this on the folds, on the crusty in axilla area, or even on the vulva of this patient. And as we can see, we found a different profile, immunophenotype profile, that is CD1A positive, PS100 positive in all of these patients, that proved that it was Langerhans cell histiocytosis associated with ECD. So, I told you that we make a comparison of the classical xanthelasma from control population and ECD patients, and what we found was that we have a kind of specificity of the cells, the two-tone cells, that are in the dermal, like here, that was much more frequent in xanthelasma-like lesion in ECD than in classic xanthelasma. And we found more fibrosis in classic xanthelasma than in xanthelasma-like lesion in ECD, and the factor here was, that is the coagulation factor, was more expressed in ECD lesion than in classic xanthelasma. That is a point very interesting because it helps to give the diagnosis, the proper diagnosis on this patient. So the takeaway message from this paper, that is the big, largest series about skin manifestation in this paper, and what we found that was the xanthelasma-like lesions were the most prevalent lesions, that the pathology of this xanthelasma-like lesion were quite specific with the morphology and the density of histiocyte cells infiltrate, with the two-tone cells that were very frequent and with a large density that will help for ECD diagnosis. And what we found also is that the biopsy we practice on this lesion in the face were finally very easy for a dermatologist and useful for the mutational status to know if you get the BRAF mutation or not, and this is very important, as you know, for the treatment in the context of ECD disease. So, I'm talking about the second point, that is ECD and molecular targeted therapies, skin toxicities. Alors, you know that there is a large development of entity with quite a revolution for efficacy in metastatic melanoma with BRAF mutation. And this development has largely improved our knowledge about the skin entity toxicities. You know that these small molecules are used in ECD patients with BRAF mutation, and we know that this mutation is around 55% of is found in around 55% of patients. And what we do when we have this mutation is try to target the kinases that are implicated in the MAP kinase pathway, that is a cellular pathway that is upregulated in this patient. So you get the BRAF inhibitor on this way, and the MEK inhibitor just downstream from the RAF, from the protein RAF. So, and the complexity is increasing because we mix and we add both inhibitor, like combination of kinase inhibitor that will give maybe different toxicities with the cumulation. So let's have a look at some skin toxicities with this molecule that are currently used in many patients and are increasing, and we are quite lucky because as I said, the metastatic melanoma with BRAF mutation opened the door to better understand and to screen for toxicities of this molecule, because they have been developed before they have been proposed in patients with ECD. So let's have a look at the vemurafenib and toxicity. This is a quite frequent follicular hyperkeratosis. We can find in a large proportion of patients with all these tiny follicular hyperkeratosis we can see on the face, on the eyelids here, and on the frontal sides. And sometimes we can find also hyperkeratotic papules right on the thighs and on the body that are quite frequent, because this is the most frequent adverse events for skin disease, for skin we can see. It can start very quick at day 7 or later, and most of the time we use emollients that are useful, and or exfoliative cream to contain this side effect. Another illustration is the same follicular hyperkeratosis of the limbs with all these little papules from the follicles, and these more inflammatory lesions that could occur itching or aesthetical impairment. And most of the time we propose also moisturizing cream, exfoliating cream, and of course we make both educational program to tell that it could come and what to do to be in front of the one set of these adverse events, to inform the patient that it might be, but it's not a big deal, and it can be manageable, and we talk about this regularly because it's quite frequent. This is another hyperkeratosis of the nipples. You can see the nipples of a man who observed 3 months after the beginning of verafenib an hyperkeratosis of the nipples that is quite they are not painful, but with a little impairment. Anyway, it was very archy here, and you can see all the areola that is involved by hyperkeratosis. And there are a paper dealing with this side effects in melanoma with the same description of the lesion. This is one of my patients, and the paper deals about a series of 2 patients. not a series, but 2 case reports. One of the main side effects for the skin is the problem of cancer. I'm an oncodermatologist, and of course I'm very concerned by the occurrence of carcinoma. And as you know, with vermurafenib and dabrafenib too, we can have lesions on the sun-exposed members or face, lesions that are crusty, that are infiltrated the derm, and that will be a Bowen disease, like it is represented on the top of this slide, or go to squamous cell carcinoma, that is that is more serious than a Bowen disease, that is intraepidermic, and squamous cell carcinoma can go somewhere else and is more problematic. This one set is quite rapid. There are many papers that say that it could come in a short delay of less than 3 months. So that's why, or maybe later, for this patient it was 1 year later, we follow up, and there was no one set of this lesion before. And so it's very important to inform patients for the UV prevention and education for this risk, because it's carcinoma and it's important to deal with. Another potential life-threatening is the rare, but the possible drug rash with eosinophilia and systemic symptoms that is called DRESS. This is a cutaneous side effect, quite serious, that will need to stop the drug and declare to the pharmacovigilance, and this could cross-react with dabrafenib. So we have patients, this patient developed this reaction, and he was switched to dabrafenib, and he made the same thing. So he had to get rid of all dabrafenib and vermurafenib drugs. There is another potential side effect, that is facial photosensibility. With the combi therapy, this patient had vermurafenib and cobitinib. We need to prevent this, to explain that sun is very bad for this drug, to make education and sun protection. Some other rare but important to know is that you can observe eruptive melanocytic nevi with vermurafenib, and with the theoretical risk for primary melanoma, as it was described in other series by Stephane Barete, in melanoma treated with vermurafenib, the emergence of eruptive melanocyte nevi or primary new melanoma. So it's very rare, but it has to be taken in consideration. And for almost the last slide, we have observed also another disease, that is sarcoidosis, that was induced by vermurafenib. You know, vermurafenib is a molecule that is involved in immunity, and we think that autoimmunity is modified by this drug, and this is one of the illustrations. So what are my practice guidelines? Quite personal, because it doesn't exist clearly in the literature. It should be interesting to do this and to put it on the paper. I will say that for this drug, we have to avoid sun exposure with protective sunscreen, with SPF of almost 50, and protective dressing. To educate, of course, we do this patient to auto-screening of skin lesion, to report to practitioner dermatologists, and of course, before initiating this drug, talk with the patient about frequency, severity of the adverse event, check skin regularly, that is maybe the most important, for evaluation and referral. In my practice, I do once a month for the 3 months, and then each 3 months, and if ever something happens, the patient is seen. And I will say it's very important to include patient in observational study, like axevimib, we have it in France. It is an Any Cancer initiative for best detection and screening for adverse events with NTT. And for conclusion, skin issues in LCD, important of cutaneous smile-like lesion for diagnostic and for to perform molecular detection of BRAF mutation, and for skin entity toxicity that are going to grow because you have emerging therapies in signaling pathway and also in checkpoints molecules. The skin toxicity is mostly manageable. Sometimes we have to stop it. We need to be checked. Patients need to be checked regularly and evaluated. And this is interesting because we learn about pathophysiology of this disease, whatever mutational status. And we need, I think it's very important to get for gathering, and it's not a joke, at least the title of your session, for gathering cohorts of ECD patients for skin follow-up under NTT. And this is my last slide. I want to acknowledge this meeting for working across specialties. And I will thank, of course, the clinical care team of internal medicine with Julien Arrange, Fleur Cohen, and Zelida Moura, my dermatological team as the head chief and PT Salpêtrière of this unit, and the Marie Referral Center for Rare Disease I belong to, and of course, the patients. Thank you.